last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week: the state of New Hampshire hits the national spotlight after the child protective industry snatches a newborn right from the hospital over the father's involvement with a group called the Oath Keepers, and after the father is banned from protesting in front of the hospital from where she was stolen, and after concern over blood found in the baby's diaper, and a trip to the hospital, the Oath Keepers hold a rally in front of the courthouse during a hearing, and the court in the child protective industry backs down under all the pressure and gives the kid back to the parents and gets the last word with a gag order. In California this week, the Los Angeles County Supervisor is asking the county's child welfare agency to provide the Board of Supervisors with accurate data about the children's deaths going back to 1990. And the governor is accused of hypocrisy after positioning himself as a champion of child welfare by signing all kinds of child welfare legislation, then taking the axe to their budget in the line-item vetoes. The state of Florida decides not to appeal a court decision overturning a ban on gay adoption, and a lesbian couple files to adopt. In Utah this week, funding changes and Medicaid cuts have caused adoptive parents to send the kids they adopted from foster care back to the system. In Illinois this week, the Washington Park Chief of Police loses all faith in DCFS after it took them 7 hours to respond to an abandoned child call, and Illinois state officials meet to combat sexual abuse at the state's psychiatric facilities. In New York, the death of a child leads to a probe of the New York City Child Welfare Agency, and the Supreme Court will hear an Oregon case where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a child protective worker should get a warrant, court order, or parental permission before removing a child from a classroom to question them about sexual abuse. A government panel in Iowa has drafted a bill regarding the rights of parents of Native American children. In Oklahoma, the director of the Department of Human Services says that child abuse statistics are misleading, and the state of Wisconsin hires 31 child care anti-fraud investigators. A group of shrinks does a study that finds out that too much TV psychologically harms children, and another group of shrinks does a study and finds that 3-year-olds blindly believe everything that they're told. A pair of foster parents in Austria are in hot water after abusing the children in their care, and the British baby stealers are desperately trying to get their hooks into a child who is living safely and happily in Uganda. In England this week, a social worker is convicted of dressing up 5 children in trash bags to take them home for a visit with their mother. The doctor who missed signs of abuse in the baby pee screw-up has decided to quit practicing medicine, and police are warning residents not to let anybody in after robbers pretending to be social workers hit a few places. The British child protective industry warns against budget cuts after a study reveals that children pick up on signs of neglect in others, and 1 in 5 adoptions fails in Wales. In Australia this week, the Tasmanian Children's Commissioner calls for an inquiry into the case of a 12-year-old who was a prostitute while in state care, and for that he was fired. In Canada, the Ontario Ombudsman apparently has his work cut out for him as he is now able to look into any complaint against the child protective industry. In New Brunswick, more than $400,000 that was designated to help First Nation children and families goes missing, and the Alberta child protective industry seeks to improve its performance after a rash of child deaths in its foster care system. In entertainment news this week, porn star Janine Lindemulder plans on calling Sandra Bullock to testify in her upcoming custody hearing. John Gosling has apparently violated a gag order by tweeting about his efforts and failures to get his children out of the public spotlight, and Oksana is apparently in the market for another new lawyer. Police are investigating the death of an 18-month-old foster child in Henry County, Georgia, and in Kansas, a 15-year-old clings to life in the hospital after being shot in his foster home. Also in Kansas, a real mother sues the child protective industry for a false accusation of drug abuse, and a real mother from New York sues the child protective industry because her son Patrick Alfred has been missing from his foster home since this past January. In Washington, DSHS settles a lawsuit with a man who was placed in a foster home of a convicted child molester back in the 1970s. A school in Florida uses a dangerous restraint procedure on a 12-year-old autistic boy. In Georgia, a group home for girls with psychological and behavioral disorders gets to keep their license after a judge rules that it was the police who started the riot there back in January. In Pennsylvania, a 15-year-old girl runs away from her foster home. And finally, tonight, a 1-day-old baby from Pennsylvania is snatched from her mother who tested positive for opiates after eating a poppy seed bagel from Dunkin' Donuts. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.